Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, March 1st, 2024. This is the Excerpt. Today, a look at Biden and Trump's separate trips to the border. Plus, there's a grim death toll in Gaza, and what new voting laws might mean in North Carolina. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump made separate clashing visits at the U.S.-Mexico border yesterday. Biden called on Trump to join him in asking Congress to pass wide-ranging border security legislation negotiated by a team of Democratic and Republican senators, which the House GOP rejected at Trump's urging.
I understand my predecessor's legal past today. So here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Instead of playing politics with this issue, instead of telling members of Congress to block this legislation, join me, or I'll join you in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together.
Those comments were made in Brownsville, Texas, across the border from Matamoros, Mexico. Trump, speaking at around the same time, 325 miles away in Eagle Pass, Texas, pointed to what he called a historically secure border under his administration.
3 years ago, we had the most secure border in history. Brandon was saying it. The general was saying it. We had the most secure border, and people weren't coming because they knew they weren't going to get in.
Trump also hurled insults at Biden and said he's responsible for an immigration crisis and unable to deal with it effectively. The competing stops come around 8 months before Biden and Trump are expected to square off in the November election. And a Gallup poll released this week showed that for the first time since the last decade, Americans now believe immigration to be the most important issue facing the U.S. More than 100 Palestinians were killed and another 700 injured when Israeli troops opened fire on people waiting for food in Gaza City. That pushes the Palestinian death toll above 30,000 since the war began, according to the Gaza Health Ministry yesterday. Israeli authorities released aerial footage of crowds swarming arriving aid trucks and put blame on the crush of the crowd and Palestinian truck drivers. The incident comes as the UN says a quarter of Gaza's 2.3 million people could face starvation, and that 80% of the territory has been forced to flee their homes. Israel's assault on Gaza was prompted by an October Hamas-led attack on Israeli border communities that killed some 1,200 people, while hundreds more were taken hostage. Super Tuesday is right around the corner. On March 5th, more than a dozen states will hold their primary elections, among them North Carolina, where tighter new election laws will be put to the test. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Chris Kenning to learn more. Chris, thanks for hopping on the Excerpt today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Chris, let's just start here. What are some of the new voting restrictions we're seeing in North Carolina?
One of the biggest changes this year for North Carolina voters is a new voter ID law that was formerly struck down as unconstitutional, was enacted last year after conservatives gained a majority of the state Supreme Court. In addition to that, the North Carolina GOP-dominated legislature passed a slate of measures that tightened some of the rules on voting in the state. And that included things like, ending a 3-day grace period to receive and count absentee ballots that were postmarked, by Election Day that had previously been allowed, banning ballot drop boxes, requiring ballots that were cast on the same day as people registered to meet certain confirmation requirements. There were other things. They included absentee voters had to include a photo ID, a copy of their ID with their mail-in ballot. And the legislature did a few other things, including expanding the rights of partisan poll watchers, and also sought to change the makeup of state and county election boards that left some critics worrying that could throw election disputes into deadlock. And some of the measures have been blocked in court, and others will be in place for this year's elections.
Chris, those who have pushed for these restrictions, mainly Republicans, why do they say they're necessary?
Sure. GOP leaders, have said that the legislation will promote bipartisan consensus in election administration and really boost citizen confidence in elections. These laws were kind of long in the making and had been vetoed by the Democratic governor. The legislature was able to override those vetoes after some gains, and were able to pass those last year, and Republicans and supporters of these laws say, voters will easily adjust to the new rules, and they predict that it will actually boost trust and therefore boost turnout.
And what do voting rights groups say about these changes?
Voting rights groups, really worry that all the new requirements, they're very detailed, they're very new to people, that they're going to confuse people. Some might not be able to get IDs in time, not realize they have to get one, or they might just decide that they're not going to vote because they don't really understand what the rules are. They argue that in a state like North Carolina, which is known for close races, that even a small effect could have an outsized impact in a state where Trump beat Biden in 2020 by under 2 percentage points.
Chris, we're focusing on North Carolina, but have we seen similar restrictions in other states?
North Carolina last year was just one of about 14 states to enact laws in the name of election security that, voting rights groups said that would make it more difficult to vote in 2024. The Brennan Center for Justice, which is a nonpartisan policy group, has said that a lot of these laws, emerged in the wake of 2020, including in swing states where votes were contested, following false allegations of fraud after Trump's defeat that year.
We already saw these laws take effect during last fall's municipal elections in North Carolina. Chris, did we learn anything about how these restrictions played out then?
Yeah, that was the first election where some of these laws were in place, and it was, pretty low turnout type of election. But there was a report from a voting group called Democracy NC that found some problems. And some voters who didn't present an acceptable ID didn't receive an ID exception form, which allows people to vote if they just check one of the various reasons for not having an ID with them. They found in other cases, voters had ballots that were incorrectly rejected by some county boards. Voting rights groups really worry that these issues might loom larger in this year's election. But the state and a lot of the county elections officials have been out, really trying to not only educate voters, but educate their own staffs and volunteers who are going to be working the polls.
So we're days away here, Chris. What are advocates doing to try and get out the vote ahead of North Carolina's primary next week on Super Tuesday?
Ahead of the Super Tuesday primary, these voting rights groups have been scrambling to, educate voters, holding events to let them know about the changes. Other groups are helping people get IDs, which they can get from the state, they can get from election boards, in some cases giving them rides or helping them with documents. A lot of public service announcements, a lot of just efforts to let people know what the rules are. For them, it's all a dress rehearsal for what's coming in the fall, which is a high stakes general election in North Carolina, which Democrats are hoping to flip the state for Biden and Republicans want to win back the governor's seat.
All right, Chris Kenning is a national correspondent with USA Today. Great insight here. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
The Massachusetts Air National Guard member charged with sharing hundreds of classified documents on social media is expected to plead guilty on Monday. Jack Teixeira has been charged with 6 counts of willful retention of defense records for allegedly sharing classified documents through the social media platform Discord. The leaks exposed embarrassing secrets and analysis from across the U.S. intelligence community involving Russia's war in Ukraine and North Korea's race to develop nuclear weapons. Teixeira initially pleaded not guilty, but a filing yesterday in U.S. District Court from prosecutors in coordination with defense lawyers asked for a Monday hearing for him to change his plea. The filing did not say which charges he would admit. Parent Plus loans were left out of President Joe Biden's student debt relief plan, but there are still ways parents can save money. I spoke with USA Today money and personal finance reporter Medora Lee for more. Hello, Medora.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thanks for hopping back on the Excerpt today. So let's just start with this. What are Parent Plus loans, and how many people hold these around the country?
So, Parent Plus loans are when the well-meaning parent takes out a loan to help pay for their child's education. They can do this, but the rates are generally higher for these Parent Plus loans. So they're not always the greatest idea, but parents do it because they love their kids and they want to help them as much as they can. So there are 3.8 million Parent Plus borrowers in the country, and they're disproportionately Black and Latino.
So what is the income contingent repayment or ICR plan, and how can parents access this?
The big thing is that when Biden announced that he was going to forgive all these student loans or cancel them, Parent Plus loans were not included. So all these parents who have these loans were just sort of out of luck. Biden also announced a whole bunch of income-driven repayment plans that will lower your payments so much and are so lucrative. But again, Parent Plus loans were excluded from that. So the only repayment plan that they can use is the ICR plan, the income contingent repayment plan. And although that can be helpful, it's really not as lucrative as being able to get your loans forgiven or one of these new IDR plans that Biden introduced.
Yeah, so how does this compare with other repayment plans?
Here's an example. The IDR plans have a lower cap of how big your payment can be of your discretionary income. And on top of that, Biden also protected more of your income from being counted towards that cap. Let's say you earn $50,000 annually and you have $100,000 of Parent Plus loans. Under the ICR, you'd be paying $590 a month. But if you were able to get into one of Biden's newest IDR plans, which is the most lucrative, is the SAVE plan, you'd only be paying $143 a month. So that's a lot.
So how can Parent Plus loan holders get a better plan, a better repayment plan going forward?
So there is a loophole for parents who hold these Parent Plus loans. You have to kind of hurry up to get it done because these are going away July 1st, 2025, the Department of Education said. So first you have to have about probably 6 to 8 months of time. That's generally how long it can take to get this completed. Basically, this works if you have more than one Plus loan. It's a double consolidation process. So the first one, you consolidate these loans with 2 different servicers. That will eliminate the Plus moniker off of your loan. And here's the catch. You have to do this on paper. I know nobody even does paper anymore, paper applications, but this is important. You have to do it on paper. And so you fill out the application, you mail it in, and then you wait for confirmation that these have been consolidated. And that can take up to 90 days. And then the next step is the reason why you have to do it on paper is you only get one chance to consolidate online. So when you get confirmation that those have been consolidated with 2 different servicers, then you consolidate again online to one servicer. And here, this is your chance because they're no longer considered Plus loans, but they're considered these consolidated loans. You can choose an IDR plan.
All right. Medora Lee covers money and personal finance for USA Today. Thanks as always, Medora.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
And today is the global day of unplugging. If you can, it's a good chance to do things other than staring at your phone or using other electronics or social media. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. We're produced by Shannon Ray Green and Bradley Glansrock, and our executive producer is Laura Beatty. You can get the podcast wherever you get your pods, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.